suspension and expulsion in early childhood education, and then connections to the school to prison pipeline. Summary. Suspension and expulsions as to how they relate to school to the prison pipeline. So suspensions and expulsions have been around in schools since the 1980s. Suspensions and expulsions rarely help the students and only cause them to miss valuable instructional time. School to prison pipeline deals with schools bringing in more police officers who then crack down on students with the punishment, and students get suspended or expelled. The students who get suspended or expelled are more likely to see inside the criminal justice system. Suspension. In-school suspension is defined as the removal of a student from school for a period of 10 consecutive days, school days, or less for a serious misconduct. If the act is more serious, however, they can be suspended for longer. Suspensions can be appealed by a parent or guardian by requesting a meeting with school officials. After the meeting, there will be a school board official or hearing officer appointed by the school board to review the suspension. They will then report to the school board with a written summary of the evidence heard at the review. If the suspension is revoked, chances are the student already served for the suspension. So when a suspension takes place, it is right then and there, typically from the start date to the end date. And after that, they've pretty much already served their suspension. So it can be taken off the record, but now they've lost valuable time in the classroom. So a student who is facing suspension must go through these 10 processes. Oral or written notice of the charges and evidence supporting those charges. If the charges are denied, a student must be given an opportunity to explain his or her version of the events to the suspending school official. The suspension may not exceed 10 days unless for safety reasons due to misconduct on a school bus. To have his or her parent's guardian immediately receive a report of the suspension along with a full statement of the reasons for it and a notice of right to review. So they need to immediately receive a report, and then they have to receive a report of them saying they are able to review that suspension and then go through the process of possibly disregarding that suspension to have it requested to be removed. So if a hearing is requested, the parent and guardian may appear and may discuss the suspension with the board or its hearing officer, whoever is in charge. The school board or hearing officer appointed by it must review the action of the suspending school official. The hearing officer shall report to the board a written summary of the evidence heard at the meeting, and only evidence heard at the meeting. It cannot be anything else. Any evidence about the student and the actions have to be in the hearing, so they can't bring up something else. Any decisions rendered must be based upon the evidence, just like I said, and with respect to any suspension invoked, the student has the right to be informed of its beginning and end dates. And the last one, the Department of Human Services shall be invited to send a representative to consult with the school board at the hearing whenever there is evidence that mental illness may be the cause for the suspension. Expulsion. Expulsion is defined as a removal of a student from school for gross disobedience or misconduct for a period of time ranging from in excess of 10 days to a definitive period of time not to exceed 2 school years. In Illinois, a student may be expelled only after his or her parents have been requested to appear in a meeting with the school board or with the hearing officer appointed by the school board to discuss the child's behavior. So it is quite similar to an expulsion in the way that a parent must be notified, the student must be notified, and so on. So reasons for expulsion: weapons, threats, harassment, drug and alcohol, but also disobedience, so behavior. You can get expelled from behavior. With expulsion, there are 8 processes the student must go through. Expulsion shall take place only after the parent and guardian has been requested to appear at a meeting of the school board or with a hearing officer appointed by it to discuss the student's behavior. A student may be suspended from school pending this meeting, but must be provided the due process required to support a suspension. So typically, if they want to, like, a student can be suspended and then after the hearing and after everything can then be expelled. Notice of a hearing must be sent to the parents' guardians by registered or certified mail, stating the time, place, and purpose of the hearing. They have to know what is going on and when and where. The school board or its appointed hearing officer must provide a full statement of the reason for the proposed expulsion at the hearing and must provide notice of the date on which the proposed expulsion is to become effective. Student is entitled to consult with counsel at the student's expense. So this right is to be distinguished from the right to be represented by a counsel at the hearing. It is, you're basically going to court. You are going to court pretty much. Adequate time must be given to prepare a defense. They have to have time to go through everything and see what their case is going to be as to why the child should not be expelled. The student must be given an opportunity to call and examine witnesses, to cross-examine opposing witnesses, and introduce evidence. The decision to expel or not to expel must be made by the school board and must be based upon the evidence presented and only the evidence presented. The Department of Human Services shall be invited to send a representative to consult with the school board at the hearing whenever there is evidence that mental illness may be the cause for this expulsion. So there are a few similarities, but with expulsion, there is the hearing is a lot more rigorous, where you are calling witnesses. You have a lot more evidence typically. With suspension and expulsion, this goes into zero tolerance policy. So, zero tolerance policy. What is it? It's a set of rules and guidelines that prohibits weapons, drugs, and illegal substances, if, ands, or buts. This became widespread really after, in 1994, after the Gun-Free School Act. It became after a student brought a firearm to school. So that's where a lot of the, no guns, no smoking, no alcohol on campuses really became about. And really after Columbine, everything started to get a lot more strict. So students have been expelled for carrying pocket knives. There was also one where the pocket knife was where a student brought a survival kit from their Boy Scouts bag, brought that survival kit into school, and the survival kit had a pocket knife, and the student was therefore suspended for that. Over-the-counter prescription drugs with parents' knowledge, people have been suspended over. So this really prohibits everything and anything, but you can see that the guidelines are quite blurry. Every situation is different. Sometimes students had these things without even really realizing it, like the pocket knife, and they were suspended over it. So who it hurts? Students of color, low-income students, and children with disabilities. We will get into that with the demographics and everything a little bit later. But when it comes to zero tolerance policy, it's talking about any typical behaviors, especially, like I said, in early childhood education, which is what we're focused on. That is aggression, should be punishable, and that is where suspension and expulsion come in. So under zero tolerance policy, suspension and expulsion is a mandatory for any acts violating it. Typically, it is with toddlers, and that is where we see it a lot, how children, they don't know how to deal with their emotions. It's very unregulated. They're going through so much, and they don't know what to do, and typically when a child is upset, they kick, they scream, they cry, they throw things, and that's not okay by any means, but that behavior under a zero tolerance policy means the child has to be suspended. And this gets into the other aspect that we are going to talk about next, which is school officers and the resources that are not being used properly or schools do not have. Nationwide, more than 1.6 million students attend a school with a sworn law enforcement officer, but not a school counselor. Schools with officers don't always mean that they are helping in these situations. If the schools had counselors, they'd be able to help the children who need it most. Childhood trauma is a huge part in all of this. And it's a huge part of children who are getting expelled and suspended. If they're at home and they are seeing a parent or both parents with domestic violence, getting abused, substance abuse, if they're around a lot of drugs and alcohol or any really big life-altering moments for a child, they don't know how to act about it. They're holding all of that in typically, and that comes out in the school, which we have pretty much all seen. We know that every single family is different, and every single family is going through so many different things. Even when schools do have counselors, the average ratio is 385 students to one counselor. Now, I know that we talk about a lot with, I'm a teacher, if there's one of me, how can I help 25 plus, 30, 32? That's like the average class size, I feel like, is almost 30. And imagine that as a counselor when you have 385 children who need you and are going through so many things. You can't possibly get to everybody. It's just not realistic. So that's where the problem comes in, is that schools who even do have counselors, there's not enough of them, and counselors are very much underpaid just as well as teachers, and they're not getting the recognition that they truly deserve. Now we're going to go into the more demographics of this all. African American students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended or expelled than their white classmates. In 2013-2014, black children made up 19% of student enrollment, but 47% of the preschoolers who were expelled or suspended. More specifically, suspended students were 30% more likely to have been arrested once, 51% to be arrested twice or more, 49% more likely to be on probation, and 23% more likely to be in prison than non-suspended students. This is where the school to prison pipeline comes in. The Center for Civil Rights Remedies researched school districts with at least 100 elementary students with disabilities, and at least 1,000 of the students enrolled, and found that more than 25% of students with disabilities were suspended in 375 different school districts. We have pretty much all come across students with disabilities. It is very hard to navigate that along with other children, and when you don't have enough resources like counselors and specialists in your school, and you only have an officer or you only have a teacher, and they're going and dealing with all of these behaviors, it's more likely for them to get suspended or expelled because of these behaviors, because the resources are spread so thin. And then data from the 2016 National Survey of Children's Health found that 50,000 preschoolers were suspended at least once, and another 17,000 were expelled. Now we are going to watch a video, and it is a TED Talk, School Suspensions Are an Adult Behavior by Rosemary Allen.
There's that moment in work when there's too many tools and the spark fades. Not anymore. This is the Intelligent Can.
Young children are being suspended and expelled from school at alarming rates. Preschool children are suspended 3 times more than kindergarten through 12th grades combined. In Illinois, 40% of child care centers reported suspending infants and toddlers. Yes, those are children who have not yet turned 3 years old. African American children are only 19% of the preschool population, but comprise nearly half of all suspensions. You may be wondering, what can these kids possibly be doing to be suspended and kicked out of school so young? Surprisingly, many of them are engaging in typical childlike behaviors. I was one of those children. From the time I entered school, I was suspended at least 7 times a year. I was suspended for things like digging a hole in the playground to see if China was really on the other side of the earth. For that, I was labeled destructive. After a unit on maps, I climbed on top of the school auditorium so I could get a bird's eye view. And after the fire department and police department got me down, I was suspended. And for that, I was labeled incorrigible. There was this one time I took all the baby dolls' heads, arms, and legs off. I just wanted to see how the body parts fit together. But for that, I was labeled a demon. They actually told my parents I exhibited demon-like behaviors. Then there was this one time I snuck into the boys' bathroom. I wanted to see how they got to pee standing up. But for that, I was labeled sexually perverted. Now, these are all childlike behaviors, albeit from a very curious child, but childlike nonetheless. Let's look at behaviors. What is it that children do when they get upset or they're deemed out of control? They scream, cry, hit, cuss, fight, throw things. That's because they're kids. Kids are going to be kids. They don't have the capacity to handle such intense emotions. Let's take a look at what adults do when they get upset. Kick, scream, cry, fight, cuss, throw things. The list is exactly the same. And while we can expect kids to be kids, as adults, what's our excuse? My friend Walter Gilliam says, suspensions are adult decisions. Suspensions are adult behaviors. But what if we change that behavior? What if we focusing on the behavior of children? What if my teachers would have seen me as a geologist rather than being destructive? What if they would have seen me as a scientist rather than being a demon? Or a future doctor interested in anatomy rather than seeing me as sexually perverted? The key to managing the difficult behaviors of children is to manage our own behavior as adults. How many times have you seen an adult scold a child for screaming while also screaming, "Don't you dare talk to me like that," right? Or how many times have you seen them scold a child for hitting while also hitting? "Don't you dare hit your sister again." Or sometimes we even exclude children for excluding children. "Oh, you don't want to play together? Just go to your rooms." The behavior that we give the most attention to is the behavior that we are promoting. This is Tavon. Tavon's mother was being called at least 3 times a week to pick him up from school for misbehavior. He was only 4 years old at the time. I went to school to observe, and I was struck by how eager Tavon was to please his teachers. At one point, the teacher called all the children to the rug for circle time. "All right, everyone, circle time. Come and sit crisscross applesauce." Tavon ran over, and he sat perfectly crisscrossed with his hands in his lap, and he wanted the teachers to notice. He craned his neck. She didn't notice. And he craned again as if he was saying, "See me, teacher, see me." Again, she didn't notice. And being only 4, he became frustrated and gave up. He stuck his legs straight out in front of him, leaned back on his hands. And it was at that moment the teacher noticed. "Tavon, you are not sitting like a learner. Leave this circle and go sit at the table." Wow. Children who are suspended are 10 times more likely to enter the juvenile justice system. They are more likely to drop out of school, have low achievement, and be suspended again and again and again. And this is the beginning of the preschool to prison pipeline. Children rise to the expectations of the adults in their environment, whether it's negative or positive. When we pay more attention to negative behaviors, we will get negative behaviors. But when we pay attention to those behaviors we want to see in our classrooms or in our homes, we will see those behaviors more often. And it's because children care what we think about them. They actually want us to like them. The key is for us to be self-aware. When we're aware of ourselves, then we come to know what our hot buttons are, what our behavior is, and how we respond to the behavior of others. We come to understand what pushes us. We understand our body language, and we come to understand our tone. And these things are really important to know because behavior is defined by the person most annoyed by it. Now, for me, it was my daughter Jasmine when she was just 15 years old, teenager. She had the smartest, sassiest mouth I've ever seen or heard. She was quite clever and witty too, but that smart mouth, oh my goodness. My husband didn't understand why it bothered me, but for him, it was when she slammed the doors. Now, slamming the door didn't bother me because that meant that she was on the other side of it. He became so frustrated once that he said, if you slam the door one more time, I'm going to take it off the hinges. Imagine my surprise when I came home one day and my 15-year-old didn't have a door to her bedroom. Now, in addition to being self-aware, when we build very strong, positive, authentic relationships with children, we come to know them, what their hot buttons are, and what triggers their behavior. We will also understand how our behavior impacts their behavior. I was observing another classroom, and there was a little guy named Raphael. And Raphael was getting in a lot of trouble in this classroom. The teacher called his name so many times, I began to keep a tally mark every time she did. Raphael, stop. Raphael, don't. Raphael, sit down. Raphael, don't make me have to come over there. Raphael, Raphael, Raphael. She called Raphael's name 27 times in 7 minutes. Raphael was learning that that place was not a safe, fair, or equitable space for him. And all the other children in that classroom, they were learning how to treat Raphael. It is our responsibility to find and look for what's good, right, and best in every single child. Tom Herner, former president for the National Association of Special Educators, says, when children don't know how to read, we teach. When they don't know how to write, we teach. When they don't know how to ride a bike, we teach. But when children don't know how to behave, do we teach or do we punish? We punish. But what if we intentionally taught children how to behave? What if we taught them how to share rather than saying, you need to share? What if we taught them how to make friends, how to initiate play, how to take turns? And then, what if we gave them many opportunities to practice? Imagine a world where we intentionally taught children pro-social skills, gave them many opportunities to practice, and positively reinforced them every time they used those skills. Challenging behaviors would be greatly reduced. Actually, the pyramid model for promoting the social-emotional development of infants and young children has proven this to be true time and time again. When we use these strategies, we can disrupt and dismantle the preschool to prison pipeline. We can eradicate preschool suspensions, and we can mitigate the negative impacts of school suspensions on the child and on our society. Children do not suspend themselves. It takes an adult to do that. But we don't have to. When we focus on our own behavior, give children the tools they need to regulate theirs. Look for what's good, right, and amazing in every single child. We can stop suspensions, and we can keep our babies in school. Thank you.
So with that video, there are a few things that I think that are incredibly important to take notice. Raphael was called on 27 times in 7 minutes. That is a staggering amount. I think that when we are calling out behaviors, we need to do a better job at also calling out good behaviors. I've noticed this in my own clinical classroom. My teacher had said, when you call out positive behaviors, they're quick to notice that because they want to be told that they're also doing a good job. That's extremely important for them. That works better than calling out bad behaviors. Something else was, when children don't know how to behave, do we teach or do we punish? We teach them everything else. But do we do that? We have to set up expectations. We have to let them know, this is what I'm looking for. You need to, like the first weeks of school, this is why it's so, we're so privileged in the fact that we're here at the beginning of the school year, because we get to see how classroom management and everything plays out. Because how do we deal with these things? We don't always learn them when we're in our clinical, but we can now. And something that's really important is children don't learn from a teacher that knows that they don't like them. Just think about that for a second. If a child knows that you don't like them, they're not going to learn from you. That's extremely important when we're talking about this discussion. School to prison pipeline is extremely important. And it's a very hard topic to talk about. So it's where a student is constantly being suspended or expelled or getting in trouble, and they're actively getting funneled into the justice system. The more time they spend out of school, they can end up going down the wrong path. And it happens all the time. We've learned about it today, but there are countless stories of children who continuously get in trouble, suspended, expelled, and they keep thinking, well, why am I going to go to school anymore? My teachers don't like me. The kids don't like me. They don't want me there, so why am I going to go? Why am I going to participate? Schools need to have more counselors where the students can be helped when situations are going on at home. That's not going to fix everything, but it will fix a huge part of the problem. But like we've talked about, teachers need to learn how to properly deal with behaviors responsively rather than discipline to its highest degree. Our students should be safe in the classroom learning. Instead, some are being told that they're just too disruptive to be in that room. There are so many ways that we can learn about discipline and learn about behavior that really takes into account of the school to prison pipeline and suspension and expulsion, because discipline and our own attitude as teachers really impact the students a great deal. Now, in the impacts, families. The children who get suspended or expelled, the families have to take time off of work or pay for childcare. That's a lot on any parent, especially if it's a single parent. If their child is constantly getting in trouble, this causes for a lot of emotional distress for a family, because we want what's best for them, and so does the family. Is kicking them out of school the right thing? Now they're missing more work. Now they're going to be more behind. And now they could be disciplined for not paying attention, for not doing well. It's a rippling waterfall effect. With the school to prison pipeline, they're not getting to the root of the problem. These suspensions and expulsions. Resources and proper education for teachers is what can truly make a difference. Because if we don't, this is only feeding them further down in the pipeline from school to prison. For us as teachers, discipline is a huge part of behavior. We've known this. How do we deal with classroom management? How do we deal with this behavior? This child's doing this. How do I do that? Something that I noticed is when a child is acting out, we also, like talked about in the video, we have to set a good example. There has to be multiple warnings. There has to be a consequence that fits the action. If a child is not using a tool properly, give them warnings and say, okay, you're not going to use this specific tool, but you can still do this work. Why is it if a child is not participating, well, now you're not getting recess? They need to understand what I did was wrong, so I now can't do this. But that doesn't, if you are not letting a child go to recess, how does that correlate with, oh, I was drawing on myself? It doesn't. They need to understand what they did wrong and what's being taken away because of it. We need to be aware of what we're doing and how we are going to handle these behaviors. And that's not just all on us, but we need to be educated on that as well. And this all feeds into suspension, expulsion, and the school to prison pipeline. That is it. Thank you.